Hi, my dear friends, a Gemar Tov, and welcome to a special edition of some words of Torah for Parshat Haazinu. Zachor, remember. The Torah admonishes us to remember many events that have occurred in our history. We are commanded to remember the Sabbath, Amalek, Miriam's leprosy, the day we left Egypt, and many more. In fact, in most Sidurim, there is a section called the Sheish Zichirot, which lists 6 Torah passages reminding us to remember various events that was composed by the Chidah. Rav David Asaf notes that there is another remembrance contained in our Parsha, which alludes to the practice that we have of saying Yizkor or Hazkarat Neshamot at different points during the year. The verse states, Zechor Yemot Olam, Binu Shenot Dor Vador, remember days of old, understand the years of generations past. Ask your father and he will instruct you, your elders and they will tell you. Now this verse reminds us to remember our parents and to pray for them regularly. It is a way of showing them respect even after they have passed from this world and helps to elevate their souls. Other commentaries find different meaning in this verse, and one of those is to follow the practices of our ancestors. Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher of the 19th century wrote that this verse reminds us that it is necessary for every Jew to follow the minhagim, the customs, of his family and community. The verse therefore serves as the perfect entree for what we'd like to address, which is minhagim about Yizkor. Particularly, you may have noticed that in the last few years here at the Bayit, we've asked those who, thank God, have living parents and are therefore not reciting Yizkor to remain inside, and that instead of just standing silently, that they recite the prayer for their parents that we have on laminated cards. It's a beautiful prayer that was written by Rabbi Yehoshua Felix Karlbach of Manchester, who passed away just about a decade ago. This practice was heartily endorsed by many Rabbanim, including Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, where this practice is very popular, Rabbanim like Rav Shmuel Eliyahu and Rav Yaakov Ariel. 3 years ago, long before I started saying Yizkor myself, I got this idea from my chaver, Harav Ephraim Goldberg of Boca Raton Synagogue. The Halpern family generously sponsored the printing and lamination of the cards that have been given out in the various minyanim, and the response has been extremely positive. But first, let me address the issue of minhag. When we were in partial lockdown during COVID 2 years ago, and we weren't serving Sudah Shlishit in shul, I instead gave a series of shiurim reading from actual responsa which dealt with when we can and cannot depart from established minhag. For example, during COVID, we decided that for the sake of shortening services, we would eliminate the pauses that have been the custom for Lechadodi and Kel Adon for so many years at our shul. We studied a number of responsa, and one of the most comprehensive ones came from Harav Chaim David Halevi, who passed away at the end of the 20th century. He was the chief rabbi of Rishon LeZion and later of Tel Aviv. In Aseh L'Charav, his responsum work, he discusses the issue presented to him by a Rav regarding aliyot on Simchas Torah. The presented query was that the aliyot, which were offered to any male who wanted one, they were getting out of hand in this particular rabbi shul, and they were creating a lot of levity and unhealthy socialization. Was it permissible to put an end to every male getting an aliyah on Simchas Torah? Harav Levi discusses the ins and outs of that particular case, which we won't get into now. But in the course of dealing with that shaila, Rav Halevi methodically presented the different situations for when a kehila's minhag could and could not be changed. He cites the Talmud Yerushalmi, that so strong is a community minhag that sometimes it even trumps halacha. Minhag mivatel halacha. However, the application of this is generally restricted to cases of finance, such as upholding local business transaction practices. Rav Halevi also cites from the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who says that one must uphold the community minhag only in cases where the minhag was originally designed to create a fence around halachic observance. Just as an example, the Gemara says that if you live in a place where people don't work on the morning of Erev Pesach, then you are obligated to abide by that minhag, even though technically the halacha only prohibits you from working after chatzot, after midday. Another example is from a case cited by the Gemara, that in the town of Baishan, the minhag was not to allow the members of the community to travel to Tzidon on Fridays to go to the large marketplace there in order to find bargains. The rabbis felt that the traveling time might hamper people's ability to prepare for Shabbos. In these cases, the minhag was to safeguard halachic observance, and therefore it cannot be annulled. However, when a minhag is designed for reasons other than protecting halacha, especially when the minhag does the opposite, the principle does not apply. And the Rosh therefore states that when the current minhag causes a reduction of halachic observance, then it is appropriate and proper to abolish the minhag, even if great rabbis had originally instituted it. This is the case for the practice of our younger people who go outside during Yizkor. Now, there are two problems that I perceive with this practice. Firstly, it creates a lot of noise in the lobby right outside the shul. I davened in the Perlis Hall over Yom Kippur, and the noise from the young people during Yizkor was quite distracting. Secondly, people themselves have their sober and spiritual Yom Kippur experience disrupted by being sent out on recess and having a social gala while everyone else is reciting Yizkor. Invariably, and I know this from personal experience, by the time the chevra outside realizes that Yizkor is over and it's time to come back in, Musaf has already started and portions of the davening are simply neglected. Now, obviously, this is not a good situation. As an example of how our great rabbis abolished long-standing minhagim, and there are many examples of this, Rav Halevi cites that the Rosh's own son, known as the Tur of the 14th century, called on abolishing all of the liturgical hymns that are printed in our machzorim during the Shema blessings. And that's why, at the Bayit, as well as most other congregations, they skip those things that are called krovitz or pismon from the blessings of the Shema. And that's true even though these hymns had been instituted by the Gaonim of earlier generations, centuries earlier. Now let's discuss how this minhag of people who are not reciting Yizkor leaving the shul got started in the first place. Firstly, it's not a particularly old minhag, and most of the literature that's available on how and why it's done only starts from the late 18th century from the Sefer Sha'arei Ephraim, from Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis. He cites this practice, and the commentaries on his Sefer offer three primary reasons for this minhag of leaving during Yizkor. Number one, we are concerned that someone whose parents are alive may inadvertently say Yizkor for a living parent out of a desire to participate in what everyone else is doing. Reason number two, we are concerned that if the person whose parents are alive stands there silently while everyone else is saying words of prayer, then that might be perceived as a demonstration of protest against the prayer. And reason number three, we're concerned about an ayin hara, an evil eye being cast upon someone whose parents are alive from a contemptuous gaze of someone whose parents have already passed. Now, to address these concerns, we instruct those who are not saying Yizkor to say the alternate prayer of praying for the welfare of their parents. This obviates the first two concerns, since people will know not to say Yizkor because of the alternate prayer they are saying, and they are not being silent, but are rather also saying a different prayer. As for the third reason of ayin hara, I submit that there is a greater ayin hara when someone walks out of shul, creates a ruckus outside, and then comes back in after Yizkor than if that person had stayed inside for Yizkor. It is for these reasons that we have received such positive feedback on this practice, and I'll read some actual communications when I see you in shul on Shabbat, and why we will continue this practice, including for our upcoming Shmini Atzeres Yizkor. Those who still wish to go outside are free to do as they wish. It's a free country. We only ask that you do not congregate in the lobby so that we can reduce the noise. And might we suggest that your time is better served saying a nice prayer for mom and dad instead of socializing. We conclude from some inspiring words from the Shem Mishmuel, and these words are echoed by the Sfas Emes and a number of other great Hasidic commentaries. The word Zechor Yemot Olam, remember days of old, is not just a commandment to remember history. It's also a reminder that every single Jew was sent into this world. Zechor Yemot Olam, remember the days of the entire world. And we were created to have an impact during the days that we are here on the Olam, on the entire world. Each Jew's neshama resonates with whole populations of people. and it is each Jew's duty to try his or her best to have an influence even upon non-Jews who are in their purview, whose souls are of the same genre, who are of kindred spirits. It is a mitzvah to remember how much we can accomplish if we accept this responsibility properly. And so, dear friends, may we all have the merit to make the world a better place for 5783 and bring the redemption b'mehera b'yameinu amen. Here's wishing you a beautiful pre-Sukkot Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.